It started with laughter. Not the human kind. No, this laughter echoed through subspace frequencies and vibrated through the Galactic Council's halls. It came from towering beings of muscle and steel, war-bred aliens who had never tasted defeat. They laughed because Earth had sent a single representative to the Council's war challenge. Just one. No army, no warships, just a man with a backpack. They called it arrogance. Some said desperation. Others believed it was a pathetic bluff. That one man, whose name wasn't listed in any galactic registry, stepped out of a dusty shuttle wearing Earth-standard boots, faded jeans, and a jacket with worn-out elbows. His backpack was olive green, patched at the seams, looking like it had survived more battles than its owner. He had no visible weapon, no shield, just a crooked smile and a pair of tired eyes that had seen too much. The aliens gathered to watch. The Jarkethi, with their armored exoskeletons, pointed their clawed fingers and jeered. The Creel, towering brutes with 4 arms, roared with laughter, slamming their fists against the metal walls. Even the Drex, cold and precise as ever, allowed themselves a smirk of pity. "Where is the rest of your army, human?" One of the Jarkethi generals spat. The man shrugged. Didn't need 'em. That was the moment everything changed. The challenge was simple. Survive in the arena of trials for 10 cycles. It had wiped out entire battalions before. Even species bred for war had been decimated. But this human had no chance. Everyone knew it. He entered the arena as the great gates slammed shut behind him. Walls taller than skyscrapers lined the battleground. Watchers tuned in from 1,000 systems. The Council placed bets. Even Earth's own allies refused to wager in his favor. The first wave hit within minutes. Mechanical drones with blades for limbs screeched toward him. The man didn't run. He dropped his backpack to the ground, unzipped it calmly, and pulled out a small device. Black, boxy, unassuming. He tapped it once, muttering, "Come on, baby, don't fail me now." The device beeped. Then it pulsed. A low hum rolled out across the arena. The drones froze mid-air, spiraled, and crashed to the ground like broken toys. The audience gasped. Back in the council chambers, the Drex ambassador leaned forward. "What was that?" "He used an EMP." Another answered. "But not like any we've seen. That thing shouldn't have that range, or that precision." By day 3, the human had survived poison gas, acidic rain, and 2 genetically engineered predators. Every time, he used something from his backpack. A thermal blade made from Earth's obsolete tech, but sharper than anything the Creel carried. A tiny drone swarm he controlled with hand gestures. One time, he even pulled out a sandwich and ate mid-battle, just to piss them off. But it wasn't just the gadgets. It was how he moved, how he calculated. He didn't rely on brute strength or superior firepower. He adapted, he learned, he outthought his enemies, he set traps, lured them in, watched them fall one by one. He became a myth in less than a week, and the aliens stopped laughing. Back on the observation decks, a Jarkethi warlord slammed his fist into a console. "This isn't possible. He's cheating." "No," the Drex ambassador replied slowly. "He's human." The council began to reconsider everything they thought they knew about Earth. And the man, covered in dust and blood, leaned against a broken pillar in the arena, sipping water from a battered metal canteen. He glanced up at the cameras. "Tell 'em," he said, "next time they send monsters, maybe pack a lunch." The broadcasts went viral across the galaxy. Every system, from the frost-covered moons of Tyralus to the golden clouds of Mirak, tuned in. The human, the one with the backpack, was no longer just a curiosity. He was a symbol, and for some, a warning. The Drex military analysts began breaking down footage frame by frame. "He doesn't move like a warrior," one said. He moves like someone who's lost everything and doesn't care if he loses again." There was a quiet fear in that voice, something unspoken. Desperation made humans dangerous. In the arena he woke before the artificial dawn. The fourth cycle would begin in 2 hours, and the sky was already shifting to an angry red. He stretched, cracked his neck, and packed up what was left of his makeshift camp. His backpack, now smeared with alien blood and melted wiring, was lighter than before. Supplies were thinning. He knew what was coming. The council always escalated. Sure enough, when the gates opened that morning, they released something different. Not machines, not predators, but an alien squad, a test team of living, breathing elite warriors from the Creel Dominion. Massive beasts, twice his size, with armor woven from crystallized bone and blades built into their forearms. 6 of them, trained to hunt. They didn't laugh this time. He moved like a shadow, keeping distance, scanning the terrain. The arena's environment had shifted again. This time a jagged jungle of metallic thorns and unstable rock ledges. No trees, no cover. Just death waiting behind every misstep. The Creel spread out, standard formation, arrogant, predictable. He smiled, just a little. He slipped behind a wall of spiked rock and pulled something from the bottom of his pack, a rusted coil of wire, some adhesive putty, and a thermal core from a drone he had scrapped the day before. It took him 20 seconds to rig a proximity bomb, 10 more to plant it on the underside of a ledge. He set 2 more traps before the Creel found him. The first one rushed too fast, blades high. Classic intimidation tactic. He sidestepped, letting the brute's own momentum carry him right into the blast zone. The explosion was small but focused, took off both legs. The Creel howled in pain and confusion. The others slowed their approach. "Now you're thinking," the human muttered. But the Creel was smart too. They circled in tighter, keeping him from running. One jumped from above, forcing him to roll into the open. Another charged. He reached into the pack, fingers brushing against broken tools and empty wrappers, until they found the small mirror shard he had saved from a surveillance drone. He flung it, not at the Creel, but at the sunlight. It flashed, catching the eyes of the closest warrior. That half-second of confusion was all he needed. He dove, tackled the Creel from the side, and jammed a stolen Drex blade right through the alien's neck joint. 2 down, 3 to go. Blood dripped down his arms. His vision blurred from exhaustion, but he didn't stop. Couldn't. He tossed the backpack aside and ran, forcing them to chase. He jumped from ledge to ledge, leading them to the place he wanted. A dead zone. No weapons here, just environment, treacherous footing, loose boulders. He made it seem like he slipped, made it convincing. As they closed in, he kicked a rock down with just the right angle. It struck a support beam. The ledge beneath them cracked, groaned, then collapsed. All 3 remaining Creel fell, 2 crushed under debris, 1 impaled on his own blade. Silence. He stood at the edge, panting, chest heaving. His shirt was torn, and blood streaked across his ribs. But he was still standing. In the observation hall, the silence was even louder. The council stared at the screens, some in disbelief, others in dread. "How?" the Jarkethi general whispered. The Drex ambassador didn't answer. Instead, he watched the human on-screen retrieve his backpack, sling it over one shoulder, and limp toward the next camp zone. "He's not just surviving," the ambassador said coldly. "He's learning." One of the younger council members leaned forward. "Do you think he can win?" The Drex didn't hesitate. "Number I think he already has." By the start of Cycle 5, the Galactic Council was no longer laughing, wagering, or even speaking freely about the human. Official broadcasts were cut short. Commentary channels began disappearing from the subspace feeds. The word Earth was being spoken in hushed tones now, not as a backwater joke, but as a threat. And down in the arena that same man walked with a limp, and a fire behind his eyes that hadn't dimmed once. His face was bruised, lip cracked, one hand wrapped tight with frayed bandages made from his own shirt. He didn't care. Pain was nothing new to him. The council didn't care about rules anymore. They'd stopped pretending. The next trial wasn't a survival test. It was an execution attempt. The temperature plummeted without warning. Ice crystals spread across the metallic stone, and wind screamed through jagged canyons engineered to amplify sound. He knew the cold wasn't natural. It was synthetic, pumped in by orbiting satellites, designed not just to chill, but to paralyze, to freeze his mind. He opened his backpack again, slower this time. His fingers were stiff. His breath fogged with every exhale. Inside the bag, the remaining gadgets were few. The emergency heat pack, used. The last solar charge cell, cracked. But tucked between scraps of wire and an empty protein bar wrapper, he found a small flask. Whiskey. A gift from a dying friend. Back on Earth. For when it gets cold out there. The man had said, half joking, half serious. That friend had died in the first Jovian uprising. The flask still smelled like regret. He unscrewed it, took a sip. The burn hit his throat, then his chest. Not enough to warm him, but enough to remind him he was still alive. Then the snow came. But not snow like Earth's. This was engineered frost pollen, floating like feathers but sharp as glass. Microshards spun in the air, cutting through exposed skin. One by one, they began to slice him open. Shallow cuts at first, then deeper. The man dropped to one knee, arms covering his face. He could feel the sting, the blood starting to freeze in the open air. That's when he did something the watchers didn't expect. He screamed, not in pain, but in defiance. A raw, guttural scream that echoed through the arena, long and violent. Not words, not threats, just sound. Primal, human. The frost pollen sensors picked up the sudden frequency shift. Vibrations distorted their flight path. Some clumped together. Others slammed into each other and shattered. He'd figured it out. It wasn't the storm itself. It was the way it hunted sound and body heat. So he gave it a target louder and hotter than himself. He lit a flare and threw it uphill. The wind carried it. The storm chased it. He moved the other way, crawling low through the biting wind until he found an alcove in the canyon wall. Not shelter, not safety, but cover. And in that small hollow, he reached into his bag and pulled out a thermal knife, the last tool he had that still sparked. He drove it into the wall, not to dig, but to create heat. Controlled, constant, enough to keep frostbite away. For now. He stayed there, curled like an animal, shaking and shivering for hours while the storm raged above. He watched alien clouds swirl like angry ghosts, watched frost melt and reform across the metal floor. He waited, because he knew what was coming next. The real threat. The environment was just the appetizer. By nightfall, he was proved right. A shrill sound split the air, and down from the skies came the Korthax, a creature that didn't serve any empire or council. It was a biological weapon. A scavenger and a hunter bred in the labs of an outlaw species, released only when the council wanted to erase something completely. The Korthax was 3 meters tall, insectoid, all teeth and claws and night vision. It could smell weakness. It was blind to tech but hypersensitive to fear. It stalked into the canyon with twitching limbs and a rattling hiss. And it didn't wait to strike. The man heard it before he saw it, felt the weight in the air shift. He stood slowly, knife in one hand, backpack on the other. The creature turned its head toward him. It smelled blood, exhaustion, humanity. It roared. He whispered, "I've heard worse!" And then they charged. The Korthax was faster. Its limbs moved in a blur, skittering across ice and steel like it had been born in storms. Claws ripped into the canyon walls as it lunged, snapping its jaw wide enough to crush a man's skull in a single bite. But it wasn't fast enough to take the human by surprise. He dived sideways, rolling across frozen ground, the blade in his hand slicing through the air as he passed under the creature's reach. Sparks flew when the knife caught its outer carapace, no deeper than a scratch. The thing was armored. Too armored. He hit the wall and scrambled up, breath ragged, heart hammering against his ribs. The Korthax spun, shrieked, and charged again, limbs clicking, claws dragging jagged streaks behind it. He didn't run this time. He didn't have the strength for another sprint. Instead, he reached into his backpack. It wasn't instinct. It was trust. He knew there was something left. His fingers closed around a cylinder, short, metallic, a fuse at one end, a flare mine. The last one. He'd scavenged it from a Creel corpse on Cycle 2, never sure when he'd use it. It wasn't built to kill. It was built to blind. And that was enough. He twisted the top and slammed it into the ground just as the Korthax leapt. A blinding flash tore through the canyon, drowning out color, turning night into white-hot day. The Korthax reeled mid-air, howling, crashing headfirst into a rock column. Its legs flailed as it tried to regain balance, hissing in confusion, rage, and hunger. The human didn't wait. He threw his blade like a spear, not at the beast's chest, but at its left rear leg. It struck true, burying itself between plated joints. The Korthax buckled, one leg down, 3 to go. He ran for the cliff wall while it screeched, climbed fast using cracks in the structure, boots slipping on frost. He wasn't trying to escape, he was positioning. Because the beast didn't just move with speed, it leapt. And if it leapt now, in its half-blind fury, it would overshoot. He reached a ledge and turned, waving his arms, shouting, "Come on, ugly, let's finish this." It roared. The bait worked. The Korthax surged upward, its body clearing 10 meters in a single bound, jaws open wide, and slammed into the unstable ledge below. The rock cracked and gave way. Too much weight, too much force. The whole section of wall broke loose, and both man and beast fell with it. He twisted in midair, tucked his body, braced. The ground came fast. He hit hard. The impact crushed the wind from his lungs. Pain lit up his side. Something cracked, maybe a rib, maybe more, but he was alive. The Korthax wasn't moving. Its back had broken on a jagged spike of shattered rock. Its limbs twitched. Its mouth opened. He crawled closer, breath shallow, blood dripping from his temple. He stared at the monster that had nearly torn him in half. And then, for good measure, he pulled a screwdriver from the backpack and drove it straight through the beast's eye socket. The hiss died with a final twitch. He collapsed beside the corpse, chest heaving, eyes fluttering closed. Above, in the observation tower, a heavy silence loomed. The Jarkathi general finally spoke, voice low. "This isn't a warrior, it's something else, a death god in flesh." "No," said the Drex ambassador, arms folded. "It's worse. It's humanity, when you back it into a corner." Another voice crackled over the comms, this one from the Council's Shadow Division. "Prepare Phase 2. It's time we stop testing him and start containing him." They were afraid now, not just of his survival, but of what Earth might be hiding, if this was what one man with a backpack could do. They didn't let him rest after the Korthax, not even an hour. The arena lights shifted from ice blue to a harsh, pulsing crimson. Alarms wailed in the distance. Automated voice alerts blared through unseen speakers in a dozen alien dialects. Containment breach protocol initiated. Subject Alpha classified as Class Z threat. He was the breach. He wasn't supposed to survive the last round. But now that he had, the Council no longer saw a contestant. They saw a weapon. Back in the command chambers, high above the arena, Things were unraveling. Surveillance feeds glitched. Our eye analysis programs stuttered and failed to profile him. None of the usual tactics applied. He didn't fit the model. A lone human, with no military rank, no powered armor, no cybernetic upgrades, was dismantling their centuries-old war games using scraps, instinct, and spite. They couldn't predict him, so they decided to contain him. Below, in the arena, the man stirred awake to the sound of hydraulics and grinding gears. He pushed himself up, ribs screaming, and wiped blood from his brow. His body felt like it had been run over by a star cruiser. But he moved, because he always moved. The canyon was gone, flattened. The landscape had shifted into something worse, a sterile, metallic labyrinth. Shining walls, shifting floors, surveillance drones hovering silently in the shadows like vultures. This wasn't an environment meant to kill him. It was built to study him. He stood, slow and stiff, and slung his backpack on again. It was nearly empty now. Just wires, a few broken tools, a dented datapad, and a picture tucked in the side pouch. A worn, faded photo of a little girl in a red scarf. He tapped the datapad, checking the signal. Still jammed. He wasn't surprised. He hadn't been able to reach Earth since Cycle 1. But that didn't matter. This wasn't about getting home anymore. It was about showing them what humanity really was. As he moved through the corridors, he could feel it. Eyes watching from every corner. They were analyzing him, studying how he walked, how he chose his direction, looking for patterns. So he gave them chaos. He doubled back, left fake trails, sabotaged cameras, smeared blood on walls to mimic injuries he didn't have. He whispered nonsense in 3 different languages just to confuse the surveillance mics. Let them watch. Let them think. He was already 10 moves ahead. Then the walls closed in. Literally. From the ceiling, high-speed stun beams fired in precise bursts. From the floor, electrified tiles pulsed in calculated rhythms. Gas vents hissed as neural suppressants flooded the air. He ran. Not away, but toward the source. Every system had a heart. Every labyrinth had a nerve center. He counted the pulses, mapped the direction of the beams, felt the hum of generators through his boots. And when he found the control hub, sealed behind a blast door 3 meters thick, he didn't even flinch. He reached into his backpack and pulled out what no one expected. The cracked solar cell from Cycle 4, 2 wire coils, and the mini-pulse capacitor he'd salvaged from the drone swarm days ago. It took him 8 minutes to build a makeshift EMP bomb. He wrapped it in cloth, jammed it in the door's magnetic seal, and stepped back. The blast wasn't loud, but it was precise. The door hissed, then groaned, and slid open. Inside, blinking consoles lined the walls. Dozens of data feeds scrolled with predictions, simulations, probability trees, all of them focused on him. And at the center of the room was a chair, with restraints, waiting for him. He walked in, slow and steady, looked around, read the displays, saw the results of hundreds of alien analysts trying to decode what he was. They didn't get it. He walked to the main console, found the feed switch, and turned it on. Every planet, every council member, every empire that thought humanity was a joke, now watched as he stood in the middle of their precious control room, broken and bloody and still breathing. He leaned into the camera, eyes dark and voice hoarse. "I came here with a backpack," he said, "and now I've got everything I need." He smiled. They sent monsters. They sent weather. They sent nightmares. You know what Earth sends? He reached into his side pocket, pulled out the photo. Fathers, brothers, bastards with nothing left to lose. He dropped the feed. The screen went black. The blackout didn't just kill the arena feed, it hit harder. Galactic Council systems blinked offline. Surveillance channels, live arena data, predictive models, all scrambled. Entire sectors lost visual on the labyrinth. Chaos rippled through command decks, war rooms, and observation chambers. And in the middle of that silence, deep underground, a human with cracked ribs and an empty backpack walked through the heart of the Council's most secure facility like he owned it. No one dared to stop him. They didn't know how anymore. The path through the control hub led to the maintenance tunnels, cramped spaces between walls where coolant pipes ran like arteries and ancient power lines buzzed with enough current to vaporize flesh. The Council had never expected a contestant to find these. They weren't meant to be accessible. He crawled through them anyway, dragging his battered body inch by inch. One arm numb, the other holding on to the photo. That little girl in the red scarf, his daughter, his reason, his anchor. Back on Earth, she was probably gone. Maybe dead, maybe hidden. The war that took everything from him hadn't spared families. The Council's allies had leveled entire cities, tested weapons on civilians like it was a game. That's why he volunteered. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about vengeance. He reached the final chamber just before the alarm reset. The maintenance shaft dropped into a cylindrical core glowing with blue light, a warp node that powered the arena's artificial physics and environmental shifts. It controlled gravity, temperature, magnetic field, even time dilation. It was the beating heart of the trials. Destroy it, and everything collapsed. He sat there a moment, legs dangling over the edge, staring at the glow. His breathing was shallow. Each inhale rattled. Then he reached into his backpack one last time. The contents were pathetic now. A wire, a switchblade, half a circuit board. But all he needed was the battery, a compressed lithium cell still wrapped in heat insulation. It was cracked and unstable, pulled from a damaged Creel comms unit days ago. If he rerouted the charge into the warp node's core, boom! It wasn't just sabotage, it was a message. They made him fight in their arena, turned his pain into spectacle, mocked his species, his planet, his daughter's death. Let them feel it now. He pulled the wiring loose, wrapped it in scrap, shoved it into a thermal vent at the base of the core, and tied the connection with trembling hands. One wrong spark and he'd never breathe again. That was fine. He wasn't planning on going home. As the charge started to heat, he pulled the photo out again. One last time. The edges were curled now. A burn mark had singed the corner, but the girl's smile hadn't faded. "Your daddy didn't run," he whispered. The core began to hum louder, the energy shifting into overload. Lights flickered. The metal groaned. He stepped back, slowly, toward a maintenance lift shaft that would, hopefully, carry him far enough out to survive. Just far enough to see it all fall. He hit the lift panel. Nothing happened. The system had auto-locked. He was trapped. He looked down at the lift controls, then at the photo in his hand. Then he smiled. Of course it would end this way. From a pocket in the backpack, he pulled out the flare lighter, half dead, barely sparking, and flipped it open. One flick. Two. On the third try, it caught. He lit the wires manually. The moment the flame hit the rigged battery core, the whole shaft lit up in white-blue light. The overload was instant. The detonation ripped through the foundation like a scream. Above the arena, watchers saw the walls crumble, the environment shift into raw chaos. Time itself fractured inside. Frozen creatures twitched forward, walls melted into sand, then reformed into glass, and then into nothing. And at the center of it, a small camera, still miraculously intact, showed the last image of the man. Standing straight, eyes calm, backpack slung over one shoulder, and smiling as the world around him burned. They declared him dead. The Council needed that narrative. It was easier than admitting the truth, that one unarmored, under-equipped human had brought their most sacred institution to its knees. The arena of trials, a monument to their dominance, now lay in smouldering ruin. The warp core had collapsed inward, rupturing space-time and triggering a cascade failure across dozens of systems. It wasn't just a building that died, it was an idea, and they needed him buried with it. But the truth had other plans, because somewhere, beneath the rubble, through broken layers of concrete, ice and metal, a faint signal blinked to life. Just one. Weak, erratic, human-coded, it pulsed in old Earth Morse, alive. On a medical frigate orbiting the wreckage, a low-tier Drex technician caught it first. She thought it was a glitch. Then she decoded it and almost dropped her console. She reported it, shaking. But instead of being promoted for the discovery, she was arrested. Silenced. The feed scrubbed. The Council didn't want the signal found, but it was too late. Because that signal didn't just carry coordinates, it carried a file, compressed, hidden in noise. It took hours to extract. When it finally decrypted, it wasn't data. It was a recording. Footage from inside the control chamber moments before the explosion, and in that footage, the human wasn't afraid. He wasn't praying. He wasn't even angry. He was laughing. Half mad, beaten bloody, skin peeling from exposure, but laughing like he wanted the whole universe to see. The message that followed wasn't spoken into the camera. It was scrawled in permanent ink across the wall behind him. "You made me!" That single phrase spread like a virus. Blacklisted on the Central Council net, but passed around dark channels, hacked feeds, pirate comms. First whispered in back alleys, then painted on walls in war-torn colonies, then shouted in riots. "You made me!" It wasn't just about one man anymore. It was about every human who'd been used, mocked, broken, every outpost the Council had tested weapons on, every colony sanctioned for non-compliance, every refugee who vanished during population control operations. He had become a symbol. And symbols don't die in explosions. Somewhere on the edge of known space, a rebel crew recovered the human's last location and followed the coordinates. They found a crater, radiation spikes, but no body, no remains, just the backpack. Still intact, dusty, torn, empty now, except for a single folded page inside. The note read, "If you're reading this, it means I'm still fighting, and if I'm fighting, you better be." They brought the backpack back to Earth, carried it through cities still rebuilding, through underground bunkers, through training camps. It became a relic, a rallying cry. Kids stopped calling him the guy from the trials. They called him something else, the backpack ghost. And in dark corners of Council territory, supply convoys started going missing. Commanders reported sabotage with human fingerprints. Drones were found gutted, systems hacked with old Earth code, and every time, someone left behind a crude symbol, a small sketch of a backpack, sometimes filled with wires, sometimes a knife, sometimes just a piece of candy. The Council scrambled to spin the narrative, labeled him a terrorist, a myth, a glitch in the game. But soldiers started defecting. Other species whispered about him with awe. Even mercenaries stopped taking contracts that involved Earth, because it wasn't just about what he did anymore. It was about why he did it. He didn't come to win. He came to remind them what a human looks like when they have nothing left to lose. They thought it would fade. That time would bury him, that the myth of the backpack ghost would dissolve into propaganda, forgotten under bureaucracy and rewritten history. They launched a galaxy-wide disinformation campaign, posted bounties on Earth-born terrorists, called the arena incident a tragic containment failure. But nothing they tried worked, because stories, real stories, have a way of surviving. And his story had teeth. It didn't just survive, it spread. Years passed, Earth rebuilt from the ashes. The cities once bombed into glass became bastions of rebellion, their skies lit with the old constellations and new promises. Children learned his name before they knew the councils. Soldiers wore patches shaped like backpacks, some with fake knives sticking out of them, others with circuits drawn in marker. It wasn't cute. It was a threat. His legacy had evolved, not as a war hero, not as a martyr, but as a template. Every broken soul the council stepped on, they saw him in the mirror. Every young fighter who didn't have armor or drones or politics, just a bag of scraps and a reason, they became him. And somewhere out there, he was still alive. No one ever confirmed it. No body, no burial. Just flashes, security footage of a lone man walking through a Drex shipyard right before it exploded. A stolen broadcast hijacked with static and a blurred image of a man grinning under fire. A voice heard in a resistance ambush, whispering, "Don't miss twice." Rumors, maybe, but they were enough. Then came the real blow. A rebel network hacked into the council's inner archives, deep files sealed behind a biometric firewall, buried under layers of encryption. And inside those archives, proof, not just of what the arena really was, a centuries-old blood sport designed to test potential threats to galactic dominance, but something far worse. Humanity was never supposed to be allowed in. We were blacklisted, classified as psychologically volatile, a species marked for containment, then elimination, under something called Directive Zero. The man with the backpack? He got in because someone on Earth faked the application. A bureaucratic hiccup. He was never chosen. He hacked his way into their game. And then he broke it. When the files leaked, the galaxy flipped. Species who once stayed neutral now had a reason to turn. Minor planets, colonies, fringe civilizations, all with histories of abuse from the Council, saw humanity not as weak, not as unpredictable, but as proof that the Council could be beaten. The rebellion stopped being a rebellion. It became a movement. No more hiding, no more polite negotiations. Earth became the center of resistance. Not the strongest, not the wealthiest, just the most dangerous. And still, no sign of him. Until one day, years later, at the edge of a battlefield on a dying moon, a council commander cornered a young human operative. The boy was barely 18, armed with nothing but a cracked data pad, a home-welded plasma pistol, and a steel heart. When the commander sneered and asked him, "Who taught you to fight like this?" The boy said nothing at first. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out something ancient. A weathered backpack, torn, faded, stained with time. Inside was a photo, a girl in a red scarf. The commander froze. His blood turned cold. Because he knew that backpack. Everyone did. The boy looked him in the eye and said, quiet and calm, "He taught me." And somewhere, out in the stars, the man who started it all, scarred, hunted and free, smiled in the dark. Because this was never about him winning. It was about all of them never forgetting what it meant to be human.